Good morning, good evening, Brendan Corrigan.
I don't know what part of the world you're in, Ollie, but good morning. I'm sure it's morning for our Australian viewers. They're tuning in their droves, of course. This is what you get when you have a show that goes all around the globe. But how are you anyway, Ollie? And my condolences, of course. I know it's been a very difficult week for you. I thought you might be wearing a black tie on the death of His Royal Highness Prince Philip.
No, I'm not devastated, Brendan. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I didn't think you would be. But of course, guys, we're going to be devoting the final half hour of the show in memoriam of Prince Philip. No, of course we won't. We're not making a joke out of it, of course. But I know Ollie is not the biggest royalist in the world anyway. That'd be true.
I don't know, I'm getting bigger by the day, but I'm still not a royalist.
Indeed. Well, look, we crack on with what we've got coming up here, Ollie, and it is a busy show as ever on Bogotá Nights, Colombia's only live and interactive English language chat show. We're setting in motion the search for Colombia's greatest, or Colombia's legends, if you will. Specifically, we're talking about Colombians who have done their bit to project a positive image of the country on the world stage. People who, it could be said, the masses might prefer to see featured on the local currency notes or bills for our US viewers, rather than largely unknown politicians, as we tend to have. So who are your favorite famous Colombians? Do you shake your hips joyfully to Shakira, or do you simply want to shake her to shut her up? Staying in the music world, is Diomedes the perfect personification of the country, or a symbol of all it shouldn't be? Football fanatics, who's your pick out of James Rodríguez, Carlos Valderrama, Radamel Falcao, and Faustino Asprilla? We'll be discussing the merits of all these individuals and many more, but more importantly, we want to hear about your favourite Colombian stars and why you think they deserve to be included on any list of the country's most influential people. Send us your nominations right now by using the live comment facility, or if you're watching this recorded, you can still get involved by commenting on where you're viewing or via tweet, the handle being at Bogotá Post with the hashtag Bogotá Nights. That's to come, but it's our take on the week's news first. And Ollie, it's a case of same, but different for this weekend's lockdown in Bogotá. So what is the same as last week? And what's different?
It's getting rapidly unsame. It's getting rapidly more same, should I say. So the big news, I think, the big takeaway is that we're going 24 hours early. So in just 3 hours, we're going into strict quarantine, but we'll be out of it 24 hours earlier. So we'll be out of it at 4 o'clock on Monday morning. Leads me to think, Brendan, that this is very much a lockdown for the bosses. Basically, go out and be economically productive Monday to Thursday, and then stay in your house and do nothing Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Not sure that's entirely fair, but that's the big news. The second news is they were going to keep the Ciclovia open for the first time ever in lockdown, but that's now been abandoned. You are permitted to go out and do your 1 hour of exercise, but you must only do it solo. I'm sure, I can tell you right now, that's definitely going to be ignored. If for no other simple reason that, quite a lot of runners, especially female runners, tend to go out in groups for safety reasons. So that's definitely going to be ignored. It's definitely not going to be applied. Parks at the moment remain open. Again, that's another big difference from last weekend when they were nominally closed. Of course, the park I go to, the Parque Nacional, doesn't have a gate, so it can't really be closed. It was pretty much full of people last Saturday, last Sunday, so I expect it to be very, very busy this weekend.
Yeah, well, I think I never learned my lesson, Ollie, because ahead of each new kind of lockdown or quarantine and new measures, when we go into them, it was the same at Christmas, and then again, was it in January for a couple of weeks or whatever. I'm always thinking, but the vibe is different this time. It will be more strictly enforced and things like that. Although I have to say, around my neck of the woods last week, it was more or less business as usual, and even more so, panaderias that were very cagey about letting customers sit in for service this time around were like, yeah, come in. You know, they weren't trying to hide it. Bar one that I like to go to was doing it a little bit more clandestinely, but the others not so. And interesting, and we mentioned this last week, and of course, guys, you can always look back on our respective Facebook pages or even on my own YouTube channel to get previous episodes. But we did talk about the unfairness of these lockdowns, and I noted today I was heading over the bridge at Centro Comercial Santa Fe, a huge traffic backed up. Now, you know, whether that's a sign that a lot of people were heading out of the city and it meant that the traffic was being backed up, a lot of them maybe heading to Melgar, Hiradot or whatever, I'm not 100% sure. Because, again, are we going to have similar to last week? And this was one difference that I did note. I walked past Terminal Norte and it was actually shut for the days of the lockdown. So we have this ring of steel again.
Yeah, I mean, that turned out to be a little bit more Plan K Pena than Plan Cadena. It wasn't, yeah, that's right, I just dropped a bilingual pun in there. Yeah, looking on Strava, the cycling application, people are going up and over the top. People were going out into Cundinamarca on their bicycles via the Piaje. It's very clear to anybody, Brendan, that, you know, with the best will in the world, nobody is completing an 80-kilometer circuit of the Bogotá Sabana under an hour. So those people are clearly exercising for more than an hour. They're clearly in groups. They're leaving Bogotá. None of them seem to have been stopped. So where is this ring of steel, fundamentally? And actually, to be honest, Brendan, again, it's almost to a point here where what irritates me is not necessarily whether or not you announce these measures, but if you're going to announce them, apply them. And if you're not going to apply them, don't announce them. But, you know, part of the reason, and I wrote a piece yesterday about, we published this morning, about how basically Claudia Lopez keeps crying wolf. And what's dangerous about this is that people start ignoring her. And where we are now, we're seeing the highest case numbers on consecutive days since the start of the outbreak. UCI occupation is being pushed to its absolute limit, despite the fact we've kind of quadrupled the number of UCI beds available in the city. So just at the point where actually we could be on the point of collapse in terms of the medical system, it's on a red alert as it is now. But this is also the point where nobody cares anymore, and so the measures aren't being followed. So I do wonder if some of the earlier lockdowns might actually be having a negative effect now, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, well, that was always the risk, wasn't it? I mean, we went into a lockdown just over a year ago, and it was kind of a never-ending one. And at the start, of course, people were very cagey because it was something new and we didn't know. Like the streets of Bogota were very quiet indeed. It was like a ghost town for the first maybe 2 weeks, even up to a month. But yeah, at this stage now, like I see it here and everything, people go, oh yeah, another quarantine, another lockdown this weekend. But yeah, so what can we do? Shrug their shoulders and kind of go about their business in many ways. And then, as I said, if people want to do things clandestinely, they're doing it as well. So there is that risk. Now, to defend Claudia Lopez, as I always like to do, I mean, she's not the only mayor and the only politician or leader in the world that's kind of saying things and then changing their mind and all that kind of stuff. I mean, we had it in Ireland and you certainly had it in the UK as well, of flip-flopping and saying one thing. It led to a memorable quote of which I used last week as well, that the hokey pokey lockdown. You put one leg in and one leg out and shake it all about. You don't know where it's leading to. But it is what it is. And as you said, Ollie, if these figures continue, well, maybe we will, because it's like the police have just not bothered to really heavily enforce this. So, but if it gets to a stage where the system's on the brink of collapse, or does collapse, well, what do we do then?
Yeah, quite. And I think it will come as a real shock if they suddenly start. Again, it's this problem that when you say the rules are X and you don't apply them, it's very difficult then to come back in and say, well, the rules are still X, but now we're actually applying them suddenly. And people go, oh, you're moving the goalposts. Because actually you are, really. I mean, let's get away from what's written down in terms of law and let's think about what the rules are. If you've just been told, okay, parks are closed, but in reality they're closed, you're going to keep going to the park. And if you suddenly get arrested for doing that, you will feel hard done by. If you get fined for that, because you'll start thinking, well, I've been doing this for the past year. Why are you suddenly fining me now? And I think that's part of the problem, that there's this lack of communication. And again, sorry to bang this drum, we've said it all the time, but allegedly we've got the top communications people in Colombia, graduates from the top universities working with the alcaldía, working with the national government. Sorry, I've got a dog here. Working with the national government and advising them on how to do their communications. And it's piss poor, frankly, to put not too fine a point on it. It's constantly changing. Reasons aren't given. There's errors. They just don't seem to fact check anything. And then to top it all off, I don't know if you saw Claudia Lopez's tweet yesterday. She's got, oh, it's a beautiful afternoon in Cuarenta with my hammock and my books and my comfortable clothing. Now, I probably get where she's coming from. She kind of wants to say, look, put a brave face on it, but Jesus Christ, that just comes across as absolutely tone deaf. For all the people that are sitting around without lots of books to read, without lots of space, without a particularly comfortable home environment, and maybe without a hammock to lie about in. So, yeah, whoever encouraged her to, you expect it from the likes of Kim Kardashian. You don't expect it from the likes of Claudia Lopez.
Yeah, well, she should know better, Ollie. Like, one thing that struck out for me looking at that photo as well was the amount of natural light. And I knew I took a gamble moving to my new accommodation here, my new abode, for independence. There's a trade-off and everything. It does lack a bit of natural light, but I was willing to take that trade-off. But that, to me, is very important for lots of different reasons. And I'm sure the mental health experts would say it's vitally important to get out and get your fresh air. Now, okay, I know we're allowed to get out for 1 hour, but I said this last week, and again, I know we're repeating ourselves, but it is Groundhog Day with these things. What is the problem with Brendan Corrigan or Ollie Pritchard or whoever walking on their own for an amount of time? If it's more than an hour, if it's for 2 hours, but they're not in a big group. I think it's far better than maybe going back into a more compacted barrio. But that's, I guess, where we are with it. We'll see how it goes this weekend. And I will just say on it, Ollie, because of course you were saying, if the rules are, if enforcement did change, like the signs coming out of the likes of Chile, where they had vaccinated about 50% of their population, and they're gone back into a strict lockdown.
But of course, a lot of that, of course, was done with Sinovac, which may or may not be effective. There's a lot of, China says it is effective. Other people in China, the WHO, people like that, they're starting to say, actually, it might not be that effective as a vaccine. And if you remember, this comes back to when Duque was acquiring the vaccines and getting dogs abuse for not having signed a deal with China. He might have done the right thing there.
Yeah, they can build a Transmilenio, but we won't get their vaccines. Anyway, guys, just to let you know, in the second half of the show, we are going to be talking about our Colombian legends, your favorite famous Colombians. It doesn't have to be of the modern vintage, although a lot of kind of the ones in my head, just by virtue of the fact that I don't know the country that long, are from a more modern vintage. But who do you think should go on if we had a new imaginary 100,000 bill? I think it's only once in my life I've been handed one, 100,000 peso note. Who would you stick on it? Would it be Shakira? Would it be Gaetan? Although he has been on other notes anyway. But maybe somebody novel. We want to know from across the world, famous Colombians who are known abroad as well. We're kind of not looking for niche people, but do send us your comments regardless. Okay, Ollie, one of our first ever shows actually back in September, it was when we thought was kind of almost end of days, apocalyptic in Bogotá, when the city seemed it was in flames after I guess it was Colombia's George Floyd moment in a sense, the death of Javier Ordóñez after police brutality. And we were a little bit cynical at the time about would anything ever come of it, the fact that it happened with a state institution. But there have been developments on that front, and the police officer who was filmed and that with his knee, with the taser, was it, if I'm correct? I'm probably getting my stories mixed up, on Javier Ordóñez, yeah. He has now, well, I guess, entered a plea, we'd call it a plea bargain. So what are the developments on that?
So it's a pre-agreement. So basically, his sentence has been decided now, and key to that is that he's going to be a witness to the other police officers back in the station that allegedly, I mean, we've got to be a bit careful with what we say here, that allegedly then beat Javier Ordóñez and worsened his injuries, leading, of course, to his eventual death. So, headline news, he's going down, it's a bit of a complex one, 19 years for the simple homicide, which is roughly equivalent to manslaughter here, plus another year for aggravated torture, which I suspect is continuing to taser Javier after the point at which he was clearly incapacitated. So that's interesting, but he's then, from what the Fiscalia is saying, he's going to directly implicate basically all the rest of the team at the police station. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens here. And as you say, Brendan, we were both, I think, quite critical of the police at the time. I think most of Colombia, most of Bogotá was. This could be a reason, if maybe not to be cheerful, at least to be, let's say, satisfied that maybe justice might happen.
Yeah, I don't want to be facetious, obviously, about a very serious matter, but is it a case? Obviously, he's not a serving police officer anymore, but you don't tell tales from school. That if he's doing this, and he is doing this, well, I'm guessing he's going to need an awful lot of protection for the rest of his life if he's going to be telling those tales. Yeah,
I mean, again, you'd have to think, wouldn't you, that this is being. I would assume that off the record, this is being politically mandated, and therefore it will be more or less controlled. I would assume that somebody is saying, listen, somebody needs to go to jail, and the public will want to see a reaction from this, and thus we need to look after him. Let's see what happens.
Well, would it be a case as well, Ollie, like this particular Kai, because obviously they would be all associated with one Kai, like a kind of a small police station that they have dotted around Bogotá and the country. That this is going to be the scapegoat. And we go, look, we've targeted these guys, we've dealt with them, yeah, and then there'll be no root and branch reform, which we talked about at the time that we need.
Yeah. That's almost certainly true, but again, let's not judge too quickly, Brendan. Let's bear in mind, we didn't think anything was going to happen. When I saw that Patrullero, I forget his name, I think it's Murillo, when I saw that he was getting 20 years, I thought, oh, well, they've hung one guy out to dry, but I guess that's better than nothing. But now with the news that he might be implicating his former colleagues, look, I mean, I love to criticize the police and Colombian justice as much as everyone else, but there's no point criticizing it when it's not justified. And at the moment, they seem to be doing the right thing. I mean, it would be remiss of us to say we want a particular outcome. The wheels of justice seem to be turning, and they seem to be more or less turning in a sort of official way according to the rule of law. Let's let that happen.
Yeah, okay, in case you've watched this space, I think I have a list here of many things that it's a case of let's see what happens down the line. A number of those ongoing in Colombia, including that Uribe case, which we shall not mention again until something happens. But speaking of root and branch reform, we also mentioned last week about the never-ending tax reform. But we have a little bit more meat on the bones in terms of proposals anyway. Of course, these will have to go through the various channels in government and things like that. But this looks like, number one, that's what stood out for me anyway, Ollie, is like expanding the tax base, because it was pretty high.
We need to be very careful on this. The income tax base.
Yes, income tax base. That's what I mean.
Yeah.
Yes. But it would be something, of course, because you were talking about this last week as well, that you'd support. I mean, I think for the first year to 2.4, those who earn 2.4 million or over, and then it would actually come down to as low as 1.6.
Yeah, 1.66 and a bit. Which it's interesting to say, Brenda. I mean, getting real data on this is incredibly hard, but like I say, it's very, very difficult to get sort of real data on this. But the average wage in Bogotá is probably around somewhere between 1.5 and 2 million per month, which means that, look, okay, we shouldn't have to wait till 2023, but I understand that, it makes sense to do this gradually. And absolutely, that's the target. Personally, I see no reason why you shouldn't be paying income tax on everything above minimum salary. I mean, it seems to me like that's the logical place to put it. I can't think of any other country in the world with a sensible tax system. I'm discounting idiotic income tax countries like, I don't know, Saudi Arabia. But looking at kind of sensible countries that have an economy that doesn't function on just hauling oil out of the ground, you'd think that you would want to say, well, look, everybody gets a certain amount where you're not taxed. There's a tax-free allowance. Why don't we make that the minimum? That seems to make logical sense. And then above that, you give sort of, on the first bit of cash, you're giving 10% to the government. The next, however many million a month, you give 25% to the government. You kind of build it up and you move it on. I've said this before and I'll say it again. I pay a ludicrously low amount of income tax. And of course, that money has to be made up in some way. And the way it's made up is either in not providing services, which is why there are no roads. It does my head in when people say, why is there no infrastructure in Colombia? People don't pay tax. The government can't conjure up concrete out of thin air. And then you've got other things, which are the other place that tax shortfall gets made up in. So it gets made up in really regressive taxes, like EVA, which is extremely high, 19%. That affects everyone in a blanket ban, and it then ends up affecting poor people proportionally much more than income tax, which is brilliantly designed, because if you're richer, you pay a higher proportion, and if you're poorer, you pay a lower proportion, and that seems to me like a very progressive way to organise taxes. I can't see why you wouldn't do that.
Yeah, careful with that word progressive if you're using it north of the Rio Grande. They don't like that. Of course, it means something different on the other side of the Atlantic Ocean. But it brings to mind, Ollie, though, because you would have those of a more libertarian, I guess, persuasion who would say, well, the government just don't know how to spend, so we could give them all our money, but they'll spend it badly anyway, that privately we can do much better. There's a whole host of holes in that argument. But it does bring to mind James Robinson, the economics professor who wrote the book The Narrow Corridor, and he described, of course, Colombia as having both a weak state and a weak society. And I guess that mix means that nobody wants to pay taxes, and then there's no trust in the state anyway that they'll actually spend them correctly. You did mention EVA, though.
Yeah.
Oh, go on.
No, you go on. I
was going to say, one of the other proposals in this tax reform as well is that there will be 19% VAT on the services that those in stratos 4, 5, and 6, so namely the wealthiest in society, will pay. Again, I know certain people in the strata 4, which will be saying, again, that's hitting us harder. But as you said last week, across the board, it works.
Yeah, look. There's always going to be somebody in a strato. There's going to be a place somewhere in the city with a strata system, where there's going to be one street where people live across from each other and pay radically different costs of water and electricity and so on and so forth. But that's always going to happen. Any system you put in place, there's going to be people that get artificially trapped, and it's sad for those people. But look, you don't have a God-given right to live in a certain area. Or if you do, you expect to pay extra for it. I like where I live. It's very central. I can do lots of things. I walk about a lot. There's a big park on my doorstep. It seems reasonable to me that I pay a little bit extra for my services in return for that. That doesn't seem unreasonable to me.
One thing I know that you will particularly like as well that's mentioned, although it will come down to each local authority to implement this if it gets the green light.
Bizarre.
Urban tolls. In effect, maybe a congestion tax is what we're looking at.
I wasn't going to... you see, this is why I wasn't going to mention that, because this has just been released fairly, it's just before we came on air, for anyone who's not following the news as closely as us. But no, I looked at that and I thought, what the bloody hell is this? And I just hadn't got my head around it, but that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, okay, it could be... It opens the door potentially to a congestion tax. That does make sense. I looked at it and I thought, I can't see the logic on this at all. What are you going to do? Have a charge to enter Septima? I mean, how's that? Where are you going to put this infrastructure? Where's the space to start building great big ruddy toll routes everywhere? It just seems like a nightmare. And there'd be so many ways in and out of it. You'd have to put tolls the whole way along. It just seems unmanageable in a city. But,
Yeah, well, unless it was on just the big main entrances. But anyway, we could talk all night about that. But this is a work in progress. They are just proposals, so we shall see. And as Ollie mentioned to me privately, there'll be many of the liberal classes in their leafy suburbs who won't like having to pay a little bit more tax. And they do have a lot of clout.
Despite claiming to be social democrats, I don't mind it when the uber capitalists complain about these things. Anyway.
Okay. Well, guys, just a reminder, in a couple of minutes' time, we're going to be talking about our famous Colombians. So do get your messages into us in terms of who do you think should go on this imaginary new set of money that we're releasing. What famous Colombians who you think represent Colombia well abroad and speak positively of the country or show a positive image outside. We're going to be getting to that in a couple of minutes. We'll sprinkle over, if I can use that word, the fact that spraying of the coca crop might come back, Ollie. But that's an ongoing issue as well. Coincided with a visit from some head honchos from the Biden administration in Bogotá this week, and then we had news that they were going to restart the spraying of the coca plant, which Ollie is 100% in favor of.
It's just stupid, isn't it? I don't, to be honest, glyphosate doesn't bother me, if for no other reason that, go to any agribusiness store in Bogotá and you'll see litres and litres and litres of the stuff being carted out of the door on a constant basis. There is absolutely no chance of anybody who's buying produce in Colombia, that's definitely been hit by chemicals. Unless you're absolutely certain of the farm you got it from, then absolutely, it'll have been doused in chemicals. Roundup, famously uses glyphosate, and Roundup is used, as far as I can see, by at least 99% of all Colombian farms in insanely high doses, and that stuff is bloody horrible. So I'm not a massive fan of glyphosate, but also I don't necessarily buy the conspiracy theories. It always seems to be, some farmer in the middle of nowhere. It's never a sort of scientist who seems to find something wrong with it. Where I think it is stupid is it just seems like a reductive way of, flying planes to blast plants from the sky. This is something out of kids' sci-fi from the 1990s. It's bizarre. I think sometimes people don't understand just how big parts of Colombia are. We've both been to Guaviare. You sit on the top of the Cerro Azul there, you look out at the beginning of the Amazon, and it's vast. That's only one tiny, tiny corner of Colombia's part of it. Hiding coca leaf in there would be, it's a real fool's errand to just keep flying planes over. It's insane.
it kind of, to use an analogy that somebody else used in relation to lockdowns, but it's like maybe burning down your house if you've got a beehive in it or a wasp hive. It's total destruction completely. But anyway, it is what it is. One quick story though, Ollie, that caught my attention in the world of sport, in football. Kind of two extremes of Dimayor's tough stance on playing with COVID. We had Águilas Doradas, who could only field 7 players, but they couldn't. They looked for the game to be postponed at the weekend, and they weren't allowed, so they had to go ahead against Bogotá Chica, I think it was, and anyway, lost the game with 7 players, unsurprisingly. And then the other side of it was Pereira knew they had 10 members of staff, including 5 playing members, tested positive, but they went ahead and fielded a full-strength squad and won a game against Independiente Medellin. And now they've been fined, but not docked any points or anything like that. Fined the princely sum. I don't know what's this like for a regular enough club, ordinary enough club like Pereira. Just over 36 million pesos. Yeah, I mean, probably a drop. Well, not exactly a drop in the ocean, but the wages.
I doubt it's a big sum for them.
Yeah, I would think the same. But yeah, just the two extremes that Dimayor, that they wouldn't allow Águilas Doradas postpone a game, which I think would have been the common sense option, and then Pereira, knowing that, of course, go, okay, we'll try and hide the fact that we've got COVID cases and just go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, look. And anyway, they've missed the trick. They should have just tried to have a couple of guys sent off. Just go around swearing at the ref so he sends you off. Because after 5 sending, if you're down to 6 men, the game gets abandoned anyway. I'm pretty sure.
Okay, well, yeah, attack the ref. Maybe they did miss a trick. Okay.
No, don't attack him. Just go on mouthing off to him so he has to card you for dissent. I'm not advocating violence.
Verbally attack the ref, then. Yeah, I have to be careful here what you say. That things could get out of hand. Anyway, Ollie, let's get on to our main topic, as we mentioned at the top of the show. Famous Colombians, or Colombian legends, as you put it as well. That people that we think, and we've got our list, that we would put on new notes if they were coming out here. Not exactly in the world of politics. You get a lot of the notes of people from politics. Okay, we've had Gabriel Garcia Marquez as well, and there have been other in the arts and culture world. But we're kind of, well, my list is a little bit more, we'll say, glitzy perhaps. But when you think of famous Colombians, or even before you came to this country, like who did stand out for you in it, projecting a positive image, or did you even have one that projected a positive image?
Or if you're outside Colombia, who do you see representing Colombia in El Exterior?
Exactly. Yeah. Well, Ollie, that was my question to you though as well. Like when.
Oh, so you want me to? Oh, well, I mean, I think the first Colombian I knew, who I knew was Colombian, like I connected him not only through being famous, but his nationality as well, would be, of course, the iconic, the legendary, the one and only Carlos El Pibe Valderrama, who's, no longer my favorite Valderrama in Colombia, but I prefer El Cholo. But El Pibe, I mean, what a legend. Seeing this guy strut around with his gigantic fluffy afro, his iconic moustache, and of course he was a very fine player as well. So he was footballers, really. People always ask, don't they? You've talked about this before, but Pablo Escobar really wasn't a big deal in the 90s in England. I mean, like, people kind of knew about it, but it certainly wasn't what you'd first associate with Colombia. You could just associate a whole slew of footballers.
Yeah, exactly. That's the same for me, because as I did mention in previous shows, somebody mentioned the name Pablo Escobar to me before I came here for the first time in 2009. I'd be like, who? Never heard of him. And I didn't know much about Colombia at all. And it's only like now in retrospect, because like Valderrama, of course, I do remember him from the 1998 World Cup. Faustino Tony Espria as well. Of course, he went and played at Newcastle.
Legend.
And one of my best friends. I was a big Blackburn Rovers supporter. He was a Newcastle supporter when both clubs were flying high in the Premier League or Premiership, as it was called at the time. So, I remember he had posters on his wall of Tony Espria. But I didn't associate him with Colombia per se. It's only, as I said, in retrospect, they're Colombians, okay. It kind of Colombia was this far distant land down there that I no real relation or link up to at all. But it was certainly Colombian footballers that first sprang to mind. So then after that, and again, I guess I heard, the Colombian singer, but it was Shakira. And the hips don't lie. That is what sprung.
Of course,
yeah. That was probably outside of the world of sport, the first Colombian that I can recall. But again, did I actually back in the in the late 90s, early noughties, know exactly the country she was from? I just knew she was somebody different. But she was singing English, so it didn't really make much of a difference.
Didn't register so much, yeah. I mean, I'd say, singers and I don't think music was a big influence on us, but sports certainly were. I mean, not just footballers, but there was Montoya, of course, in Formula One.
Yeah. Exactly.
And one of the things that always fascinates me, I'm thinking about Colombian footballers. I'm thinking about Hugo Rodríguez. I'm thinking about Juan Pablo Angel. And they were never really that big, I think, in Colombia. But Hugo Rodríguez I find fascinating in that, he's almost unknown in Colombia, despite, having worked at a relatively high level in Europe for years playing football. Years and years he was in the Premier League as a jobbing striker, but he never, in no way kind of recognised in his own country.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned Angel as well, because my eldest brother was an Aston Villa supporter, and didn't Angel play with Aston Villa?
Yes.
Yeah. So again, that's another guy. But the link, I never just made the connection, because as I said, Colombia was this land way down there, and as Angela, cheers for getting in touch. I thought our comment thing was broken there. I was really hoping it was broken. maybe we were talking to ourselves for the last half hour here, Ollie.
Maybe it's a dream.
Yeah, exactly. I'm in dreamland here. But Angela, it's a fair point. I didn't know about, because there is this assumption that now, and because of Narcos in the last few years, everybody does talk about Pablo Escobar. But in fairness, the association with that C word, cocaine, was there. But now, of course, Pablo Escobar is not like my brothers and brothers-in-laws have watched the series, and it's a big thing. But before that, it was like, this is bad in one way. It was like, well, where is Colombia? Almost.
Oh, yeah, and of course, I think there is a big difference. Angela here mentions the US, and I wonder, I suspect it probably would be very different, if for no other simple reason than they just don't get, kind of footballers. So, like in the same way as, if, as you say, if you were Colombian and you walked into a bar in Newcastle upon Tyne and you said, I am from Colombia, I wouldn't be surprised at all if half the bar bought you a drink just because of Tino Asprilla. Legend.
Yeah, exactly. Fully agree.
Oh, and of course, Alexandra Pajares, it's never a night complete without her. Lucho, of course, and Fabio Parra, the great Colombian kings of the mountains in the Tour de France, the Tour L'Avenir in the 80s.
Would they have been around in the same time or just before Ireland's golden period in cycling with Stephen Roach and Sean Kelly? Sure, they would have competed together.
Yeah, they were a little bit earlier. But it's certainly in Kelly's time, yeah. Roche, of course, burned bright and burned out.
Okay. By the way, Jose Alfredo Franco Leon, kind of a cryptic message there that you've sent us in the Science field. I thought it was science fiction
What?
field. Sorry.
What's cryptic about that?
No, I thought he said in the science fiction field, and then he didn't mention the name. No, I read it incorrectly. Sorry, in the science field. Okay, yeah, there's nothing cryptic about it.
Julio Garavito, legends. And actually, Jose, I mean, I can tell you here, Jose, one of my inspirations for it was Brendan that suggested the topic, but one of the things that really made me think about how to explore it was exactly that, the 20,000 peso bill, because you're talking about the old one, the blue one. You've got Julio Garavito, and you're thinking, legend. You know, the man did extraordinary work that I don't understand because I'm not a scientist, but extraordinary astronomical work on the way the moon functions, basically. He's got a crater named after him on the back of the moon. He's a proper legend. And he's been replaced by a middling politician, Mickelson, who looks kind of like an angry turtle on the toilet.
Well, you see, this is the thing. We're going to get into trouble for this. We're like my list is very much, as I said, a bit of a tacky list of my famous Colombians. But Julio Garavito, pardon me, sorry, but I've looked at that old 20,000 note, but I didn't know who he was, and shame on me for not investigating. But again, as I said, I'm not really if you mention that name to most lay people, they won't know who it is. No,
that's true. And I would say that's definitely true of Mickelson on the 20,000, and probably true of everybody else.
But is it a case as well, though? Like, are Julio Garavito's achievements kind of like comparable to a Newton or?
No, but that's setting a ludicrously high bar, isn't it? I mean, it's like kind of saying, well, my nephew's very good at football. You know, he's won the Champions League and everything. Oh, yeah, but he's not Messi, is he? Do you know what I mean? It seems unfair to be lambasting for that. But no, he's a respected scientist. If you talk to astronomers, around the world, they'll say, oh, yes, we know who Garavito is. And he's that guy from Colombia, isn't he? Okay. Whether he represents the barrio, that's a different thing. Can I make a suggestion here? I'm going to throw one out. We've not got anything in the comments. I'm going to take my opportunity. I'm going to step forward. I've got to say, tell me a man, Brendan, that represents the Colombian tienda, the average, the working Pepito Perez of Colombia. Not one person could represent that man more than El Cacique himself, Diomedes Diaz.
Yeah. Agree 100%.
I mean, I will be impressed if anyone can disagree with this. Now, I'm not saying he's a hero. I'm not saying he's a particularly nice person in all his aspects. But in terms of representing a certain part of Colombia, exemplary.
Yeah, like obviously multiple women, children from, how many, where do you draw the line? I don't know. There's rumors, what he has, about 40 different children or whatever. But yeah, his songs, obviously, no pun intended, well, pun intended, strike a chord with the vast majority of Colombia and across, it goes across the regions from the Llanos to Pacific Coast down to Pasto, if you're up on the coast here in Bogotá. Yeah, exactly. It's you'll hear him everywhere, and I don't know, is there anyone of a certain class anyway that would speak ill of the man? I don't think so.
No, he's absolutely, as far as I can see, loved, as you say, in certain strato. I don't necessarily think he crosses the strato. He's very much, as you said yesterday, he's kind of the working class Carlos Vives.
Yeah, we'll get to Carlos Vives in a bit as well. Like, I'm sure if I went out here and started shouting abuse out loud about Diomedes, I mightn't get home alive. I'd upset a lot of people. But I was going to give one then on the other side. Well, coming back to the sporting world, but kind of in the same mold as the Diomedes, because if you're talking about like the modern Colombian footballers that we know and love right now, or some of us may anyway, you've got like the two big ones, James Rodríguez and Falcao. But Falcao is very much the family man. I think he married his childhood sweetheart and they have children together and stuff like that. James, he did marry David Ospina's sister, but of course they went their separate ways. And this image that James was maybe, he's a bit of a playboy. He's a pretty boy as well. The girls fancy him, of course. A little bit of a rogue, inconsistent at times too. So that maybe he's a better, be careful what I say here, but a better representation of Colombia in general. And people can relate to that because, he did cheat on his wife. But he's still looking after the children as all good fathers should and stuff like that. A bit easier when you've got plenty of millions in the bank as well. But he was the pin-up boy as well. Okay, he's fallen back considerably since the heights of 2014, but he will forever be a legend because of that wonder goal against Uruguay in 2014. And for that they'll still be talking about him in 30 years' time in the same way. Another success-starved country, the Republic of Ireland, we still talk about our heroes that got to the quarter-final of the 1990 World Cup playing horrible football. But at least Colombia played attractive football of sorts in 2014.
Yeah, and don't forget he won the Golden Shoe in that as well. So, absolutely. Absolutely. I think he's destined to be a legend. The question is, I suppose, whether he'll turn up on the crisps or not, as Valderrama did, just like Saint Gary Lineker.
Well, he's in so many other things. Head and Shoulders, I know that's international, but he's been in so many adverts. What else? By the way, Angela, and when I put out the preview of the show on the various social media, an American guy who regularly comments anyway, but he's not always tuning into the show, but he comments on the preview. He did mention Juan Valdez, of course, a fictional character, but he is. The image, of course, the poncho. What's the other name for that? Not the poncho. What do you call it?
Ruana.
Thank you very much. And the sombrero Waldau, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. So yeah, a good representation. But there is a man, wasn't there? There is a guy who played him, of course.
Yeah, but actually, what's interesting about Juan Valdez is that his name was specifically chosen to be representative of Latin America and not of Colombia, which is why it's not a particularly Colombian name.
Yeah, like maybe if it was something Uribe, it might work better.
But yeah, he was just meant to be generically Latin American, because right from the start, the Coffee Growers Association had always thought about promoting the product overseas. Very smart move.
Yeah. By the way, Jason Duque, cousin, brother, family member anyway of our president. Are you, Jason? Do let us know. But yeah, the whole point of this is that it is positive. And I may have been talking slightly negatively about James, but just altogether, it's more a positive image. I mean, people, for example, in the UK or in Germany, don't particularly think negatively of James. That's why I'm putting him out there as well. So if you thought I was kind of having a go. But yeah, and then he mentions athletes. And I know you had Mariana Pajon in your list, Ollie, to go down there. Double gold
medalist. Yeah, I mean, in BMX, which is, a bit of a made-up sport, but nonetheless, double gold medal winner. She has as many gold medals as, most of the rest. Well, so I don't know where I'm going with that. She has, I'm just remembering that Colombia actually has more gold medals than I was thinking of originally. But yeah, she's the most successful Colombian Olympic athlete of all time. So she's definitely got a shout, I think, to be.
And what about, Catherine Ibargüen, isn't it?
Yeah, the leaping lady. Yeah, I mean, tons of world records that she's recently lost, but did have in the first place. Yeah.
Do people kind of dismiss her in the same way that some Colombians dismiss Gabriel Garcia Marquez, because she's now based? I think she's based in Cuba, and I think anyway she's not based or not Cuba, Puerto Rico. Sorry, Puerto Rico. and like Marquez spent most of his later life anyway, in Mexico. So it's like, why didn't he come back to Colombia?
Slightly criticised in Colombia, which I don't think went down particularly well. I mean, Gabriel Garcia Marquez. I don't know. I've never got further than about 2 pages in Gabriel Garcia Marquez's books, and just thought, I don't have time in my life for this. I've never found him to be particularly interesting. So Jason's giving us a lot here. But this is the problem, isn't it? People like Elkin Patarroyo or Maria Isabel Urrutia. I mean, these are names that are just sailing over the top of anybody, I think, outside of Colombia. Nairo Quintana. Yeah, okay, he's a good shout. Very popular among my friends who are cycling fans back in England. Hugely popular. He was when he started. He's very much become less popular as time has gone on. You know, he started off as a swashbuckling young buck, making big attacks. He seems to have no fear. And then in his later career, he hasn't kind of shown the same kind of panache and verve. And then that suffered. I think he's a little less popular because of that now.
Yeah, and look, at kind of you could say, am I right in saying a golden age, though, for Colombian cyclists? Because you've got, again, now names I'm terrible to remember, but is it
Egan Bernal?
Bernal, that's it. Sorry, Egan Bernal, exactly. And then there are another few now that are kind of, would say, simmering away there, that might kind of explode onto the big stage and do something at one of the big ones, like the Tour de France or the Vuelta de España or something like that. So, or the Giro d'Italia. But yeah, we'll see. But yeah, in cycling, of course, and Colombia has a long tradition. But like when we mentioned Diomedes, of course, and we did talk about this kind of having international appeal. Diomedes wouldn't particularly be well known
that's true.
In Europe, for example. But sticking with singing, and again, a little bit more tacky for some people or cheesy, but Shakira. Now, there are those, of course, who will defend Shakira and say her earliest stuff wasn't that like very pop oriented. It was like quite, well, what's the word I'm looking for? But of a higher quality, higher taste, perhaps, not just for the Philistines. In her earlier days, in the early 90s, before she became internationally famous. But I mean, there's no doubt about it. Like, she did wonders for the positive image of Colombia, Shakira.
Oh, yeah. And again, I think she suffers from Gabriel Garcia Marquez syndrome a little bit, in that she doesn't live in Colombia and is perceived to be one of these people that's gone away. You know, I always feel like, you know, when Juanes wears those T-shirts saying, you know, oh, actually, I speak Spanish. I always, in that passive-aggressive manner, of he's such a dick. But, you know, when he does that, I always think he's aiming that at Shakira. You know, he's making that big thing. And by the way, let's not forget the dishonesty of what he's doing. I think it's a really kind of disingenuous way to do that. Because what Juanes is doing, actually, when he says, I speak Spanish, what he's doing is trying to get an American audience, which I find really sort of weirdly backwards. Because, of course, speaking Spanish isn't a particularly big cultural marker if you're Colombian. You just say, yeah, obviously I speak Spanish, that's my language. What? EK? But, of course, if you're a Latino in the United States, speaking Spanish is one of the big cultural markers. It's part of your cultural identity that you're different from everybody else because you speak Spanish. So he's trying to build himself. You know, it's not like he's trying to connect with Latin America wearing that T-shirt. He's trying to connect with Spanish speakers in the United States. So I think it is a bit disingenuous how he presents himself. Jose Alfredo Franco mentioned Carlos Vives. Do we want to go into that, Brendan?
Well, we kind of alluded to earlier, Carlos Vives is the Strato 3.5 and upwards version of Diomedes, perhaps. I did have the dubious pleasure of being at an event where he was the surprise star attraction. It was Avianca's 100th anniversary celebrations last January at El Dorado Airport. And yeah, the place was hopping. They didn't want to see him go. He arrived, obviously, in great fanfare on an airplane. Well, anyway, go on.
I would say that the presence of Carlos Vives at an event kind of guarantees there's a lot of dodginess going on somewhere, doesn't it? If he's not clubbing up to the likes of Uribe and Duque, he's kind of ingratiating himself with other sort of politicians or business people who are probably not declaring all their tax, let's say.
Can I mention one then from Paisaland? I think he's Paisa Medellin guy, Sebastian Yatra for the younger generations. But he seems a kind of guy that butter wouldn't melt in his mouth. Like if you're talking about Juanes and Malumna, what's the other guy? Like I'm guessing mothers would be going, no, I don't want my daughter to come home with one of those type of guys. But if they came home with a Sebastian Yatra type, they'd be delighted. He seems the kind of nice guy of the pop music world, and I've no doubt will be a legend.
I don't know about Maluma. The guy's off the wall. I don't know what's going on with Maluma. He's just, fair play to him though, isn't it? I mean, you get some pretty dislikable reggaeton stars, but Maluma's genuinely interesting. Say what you like about him. He's open to weird stuff. We've got a shout out here as well for Carly Uchis. She's lovely, by the way, absolutely fantastic. I think she's going to have to wait a few years before she gets legendary, though. I think.
Kylie, excuse my ignorance.
She's an urban singer.
Okay. Yeah, well, I love my pop music.
Of course you do, the old pop music. What about
tacky though? Well, go on quickly. Then. You give yours.
What about Sofia Vergara, who I must admit is somebody I wasn't really aware of until I came to Colombia, but apparently is massive in America. I've never seen her act, but I have seen interviews of her because a lot of my students criticize her accent, at which point I generally say, yeah, you need to have a look in the mirror if that's the case. But they seem to have this weird idea that she's kind of laughed at or mocked in America. She represents Colombia so badly because her English is terrible. And I say, what are you talking about? She's an incredibly successful actress. Like, there are many jobs you can do in the world where you can get by without speaking your second language particularly well. Acting in your second language is not one of those occupations. That requires an incredible amount of skill. And to be honest, I've never really heard an American say that her accent is funny. That's something I've only ever heard from Colombians. Bizarre.
I've never heard her being interviewed properly, or certainly I can't recall anyway, like as in when she's not acting. So I'm not 100% sure. And again, I wouldn't have been that familiar with her when I was back home until I came to this country. But she'd certainly have to go down again as somebody, certainly to put Colombia on the map in a positive light in the likes of the United States. I'm sure there's not too many people who talk negatively of her there because as you said, if her English isn't exactly spot on 100%, if she's managing to act in it, it must be fairly good.
Of course
anyway.
It is, yeah.
Yeah. What's the name of the series that she was in though?
I wouldn't recommend watching that. Yeah, I mean, if it's a mainstream American comedy, it's very likely to be poor, isn't it?
You were never a fan of Friends, then?
No.
Okay.
Seinfeld, I can deal with. Okay. I think we've got the T sign up now.
Yeah, we have. Yeah, producers talk to us there. Well, look, guys, thanks a million for joining us and sending in those comments. It looked there at one stage that the comment facility was broken.
Tumbleweed.
Yeah. Anyway, we'll be back hoy en ocho this day next week with another installment. Enjoy your lockdown weekend. We'll talk to you next week, guys.
Ciao.